When a pregnant Emily Jones walked out of a Cleveland store, a gang led by Drake saw her as easy pickings because of her dark skin. They didn't know that her husband Jacob, a veteran with a sharp mind, was unforgiving. In 2025, racism is supposed to be gone, but not here. Their fight will reveal the truth and make the gang pay, not in blood but in law. The late afternoon sun hung low over Cleveland, casting long shadows across the cracked sidewalks of the east side. Emily Jones stepped out of the corner store, a paper bag tucked under her arm, her free hand resting on the swell of her belly. At 28, 7 months pregnant, she moved slower these days, but her stride was steady, her dark eyes scanning the familiar streets. The air smelled of asphalt and fried food from a nearby cart, a faint breeze stirring the March warmth. It was 2025, and she'd lived here her whole life, long enough to know the rhythm of the neighborhood. But today that rhythm fell off. She adjusted the bag, crackers, and a bottle of water, cravings she couldn't ignore, and started toward home, 3 blocks away. Her husband, Jacob, would be waiting, probably pacing their small apartment, his protective streak sharper since the pregnancy. She smiled at the thought, imagining his deep voice teasing her about overdoing it. But the smile faded as a low whistle cut through the air. "Hey, Mama." The voice was sharp, mocking, dripping with menace. Emily's pulse jumped. She kept walking, head high, but her eyes flicked to the source, for men loitering across the street, near a boarded-up laundromat. Their leader stepped forward, Drek, a wiry figure in a black hoodie, his shaved head gleaming under the fading light. She didn't know his name, but she'd seen him before, his crew a constant shadow in the neighborhood. "Where you going so fast?" Drek called, his grin wide and predatory. His crew chuckled, fanning out slightly, their postures casual but calculated. "Look at her, thinking she owns these streets." Emily's fingers tightened around the bag. She knew what this was, her skin, a deep brown that stood out in a neighborhood where tensions simmered, made her a target. "I'm just heading home," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Leave me alone." Drek laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Home? Ain't no place for you here, girl. Not looking like that." He took a step closer, his boots scuffing the pavement, his eyes raking over her belly. "What's that? Gonna bring another one of you into my turf?" Her throat tightened, but she didn't flinch. "It's not your turf," she said, stepping back. "It's mine too." The crew hooted, closing in, their shadows stretching toward her. Drek's grin sharpened. "Big talk for someone all alone. Bet your man don't even know you're out here, huh?" Emily's heart pounded, but before she could answer, a figure emerged from the alley beside the store. Jacob Jones, tall, lean, with a soldier's quiet strength, moved with purpose, his dark eyes locked on Drek. At 30, he carried the weight of his Army Ranger days in every step, though he'd left that life behind. Or so he'd thought. "Back off," Jacob said, his voice low, steady, cutting through the tension like a blade. He positioned himself between Emily and the crew, his stance relaxed but coiled, ready. "She's not alone." Drek froze, sizing him up, then smirked. "Oh, we got a hero. What are you gonna do, tough guy? This our block." Jacob didn't blink. "Not anymore. Walk away." The crew shifted, uneasy, but Drek held his ground, his grin widening. "You don't scare me, man. You and your little family? Y'all don't belong here." Emily touched Jacob's arm, her voice a whisper. "Let's go." "They're not worth it." But Jacob's gaze didn't waver. "They don't get to decide that," he said, loud enough for Drek to hear. "You walkie?" She nodded, her breath shaky. "Yeah, just let's get home." Drek laughed again, stepping back with mock surrender. Hero. We'll see you around. You and that pretty wife of yours." The threat hung heavy as he signaled his crew, and they melted into the shadows, their laughter echoing down the street. Jacob watched them go, his jaw tight, his hand resting lightly on Emily's back as they started home. The sun dipped lower, painting the city in amber, but the warmth couldn't touch the chill settling in Emily's bones. "They won't stop," she murmured, her hand on her belly. "I know," Jacob said, his voice hard, "but neither will I." They reached their apartment, a modest second-floor walk-up with peeling paint and a creaky door. Jacob locked it behind them, checking the windows with a soldier's precision. Emily sank onto the couch, her bag forgotten beside her. "They targeted me because of us," she said, her voice breaking. "Because of how we look." Jacob knelt in front of her, his hands warm on hers. "They don't get to win, Em. Not today, not ever." She met his eyes, seeing the fire there, not rage but resolve. Jacob wasn't a killer anymore, but he was lethal in his own way. Sharp, strategic, unyielding. And as the city hummed outside, Emily knew this was just the beginning. Drek had picked the wrong fight, and Jacob would make sure he paid, not with blood, but with justice. The Cleveland night settled over the east side like a heavy blanket, the distant hum of traffic blending with the occasional bark of a dog. Emily sat at the kitchen table in their cramped apartment, her hands cradling a mug of tea that had gone cold. The memory of Drek's grin, sharp, mocking, clawed at her mind, his words looping endlessly, "Y'all don't belong here." Her belly tightened, not from the baby, but from a fear she couldn't shake. Jacob stood by the window, peering through the blinds, his silhouette rigid against the dim streetlights. He hadn't sat down since they'd gotten home. "You see anything?" Emily asked, her voice quieter than she meant it to be. "Not yet," Jacob said, his tone clipped but steady. He turned, his dark eyes meeting hers, softening just a fraction. "But they'll be back, Em. That wasn't a one-off." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I know. It's not just about me being out there. It's us. Who we are." Jacob crossed the room in 3 strides, kneeling beside her. "They don't get to decide who belongs. Not them, not anyone." His hand rested on hers, warm and firm, a soldier's promise in his touch. But the next morning proved him right. Emily woke to a brick through their bedroom window, glass scattered across the floor like jagged teeth. A note was tied to it, scrawled in Sharpie, "Leave or regret it." Her breath hitched, hands trembling as she handed it to Jacob. His jaw clenched, but his voice stayed calm. "They're escalating." He didn't call the cops, not yet. Cleveland PD had a reputation for looking the other way in this neighborhood, especially when it came to Drek's crew. Instead, Jacob pulled out his phone, activating the voice recorder. "We're documenting everything," he said. "Every move they make." By noon, the harassment intensified. Emily stepped outside to check the mail, Jacob a step behind her, when a car slowed, windows down. Drek leaned out, his grin wider now, his crew jeering. "Nice place you got," he called. "Shame if something happened to it." The car peeled off, laughter trailing in its wake. Emily's chest tightened, her hand instinctively on her belly. "They're trying to scare us out," she whispered. "They won't," Jacob said, his voice steel. "I've dealt with worse than punks like them." That afternoon, he took Emily to meet Caitlin Wright, a lawyer he'd known from his Army days. Her office was a cluttered hole-in-the-wall downtown, papers stacked high, a coffee pot gurgling in the corner. Caitlin, mid-30s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense vibe, listened as Jacob recounted the store encounter, the brick, the threats. "They've got a pattern," Caitlin said, tapping a pen against her desk. "Harassment, intimidation, classic gang playbook. But Drek's not just some street thug. Word is, he's tied to someone higher up, someone with pull. That's why the cops don't touch him." Jacob leaned forward. "Who?" Caitlin hesitated. "Can't prove it yet, but I'd bet on Councilman Pierce. He's got a history of keeping this neighborhood under control for his buddies. Drek's his muscle." Emily's stomach twisted. "So if it's not just about us, it's bigger." "Much bigger," Caitlin said. "But if you've got evidence, we can build a case. Harassment, racial targeting, maybe even conspiracy if we link it to Pierce." Jacob pulled out his phone, playing the recording from the store. Drek's taunts, clear and venomous. Caitlin's eyes lit up. "That's a start. Get more, times, dates, anything. We'll need it airtight." Back home, the air felt heavier. Emily sat on the couch, her hands restless. "They're not going to stop, Jacob. What if they—" She couldn't finish, the thought of harm to their baby choking her. "They won't get that far," he said, his voice low but fierce. "I've got a plan." That night, he set up a cheap security camera by the front door, its red light blinking in the dark. "Every move they make, we catch," he said. "They think they're untouchable. They're wrong." Emily watched him, her fear warring with trust. Jacob wasn't the man he'd been overseas. No guns, no blood, but his mind was a weapon, honed and precise. She'd seen him dismantle threats before, not with fists, but with strategy. Still, the brick's weight lingered in her memory. The next morning, she found graffiti on their door. "Go back where you came from." The red paint dripped like blood, stark against the wood. Jacob snapped photos, his face unreadable. "They're digging their own grave," he muttered. Emily's phone buzzed, her sister frantic. People are saying you're in trouble with Drek's crew. What's going on?" "Tell them we're fine," Emily said, forcing calm. "We're handling it." But as she hung up, a car idled across the street, too still, too quiet. Jacob noticed it too, his hand brushing her arm. "Stay inside." He stepped out, phone in hand, recording as the car peeled away. Emily's heart raced, but she saw the fire in his eyes. Not anger, but determination. Drek had no idea who he was up against. Jacob wasn't just a husband or a father-to-be. He was a man who'd faced hell and come out sharper. And he'd make sure this ended, not with violence, but with the law crashing down. The Cleveland dawn broke gray and heavy, clouds pressing low over the east side. Emily stood at the apartment window, her breath fogging the glass as she watched the street below. The graffiti on their door, "Go back where you came from," still glared her mind, its red paint a wound that wouldn't fade. She rubbed her belly, feeling the baby kick, a small comfort against the growing dread. Jacob sat at the table, reviewing footage from the security camera, his jaw tight. The car from last night had lingered too long. Drek's crew, no doubt. "Anything useful?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jacob nodded, eyes fixed on his phone. "Caught their plates. Blurry, but enough to trace if Caitlin can pull strings." He looked up, his gaze steady. "They're getting bolder, Em. That's their mistake." Before she could reply, a sharp knock rattled the door. Jacob was up in an instant, motioning her back. He checked the peephole, then opened it to reveal Mike Wilson, a stocky man in his 40s with a reporter's notepad and a tired grin. "Heard you're stirring up Drek's nest," Mike said, stepping inside. "Thought you could use a friend." Jacob shut the door, locking it. "Mike's a journalist," he told Emily. "Worked with him after I got out. Helped me dig into some VA stuff. He's good." Emily managed a small smile. "We need all the good we can get." Mike set his bag down, pulling out a thick folder. "Drek's not just a punk with a crew. He's tied to Councilman Pierce, been running errands for him for years. Pierce keeps the east side stable, meaning scared, so his developer pals can buy cheap and flip high. Drek's the enforcer." Jacob's eyes narrowed. "You've got proof." Mike slid the folder over. Inside were photos. Drek meeting Pierce in a parking lot, grainy but clear, plus bank records showing payments funneled through shell companies. "Took months to piece together," Mike said. "Pierce covers his tracks, but Drek's sloppy. Brags too much." Emily's stomach twisted. "So this isn't just about us. It's a whole system." "Exactly," Mike said. "You're a threat, 'cause you're not backing down. Pierce doesn't like loose ends." The weight of it settled over her. Drek wasn't just a bully. He was a cog in a machine that crushed people like them to keep power. Jacob's voice cut through her thoughts. "We've got the store recording, the brick note, camera footage. With this, we can hit him hard." Mike nodded. "I can publish, blow it wide open. But we need to move fast. They're watching you." As if on cue, Emily's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Tell your man to stop digging or the old lady pays." Her breath caught, hands shaking as she showed Jacob. "The old lady, my mom." Jacob's face darkened. "They're going after family now." Emily's mom, Linda, lived 10 blocks away, alone since Dad passed. Panic clawed at her. "We have to warn her." Jacob grabbed his keys. "I'll go. You stay with Mike. Keep the camera rolling." He was out the door before she could protest, the engine of their beat-up sedan roaring to life. Emily sank onto the couch. Mike beside her, his presence a small anchor. "He'll be okay," Mike said. "Jacob's smart, smarter than Drek will ever be." But minutes later, Jacob called, his voice tight. "Mom's fine, but they were here." Spray paint on her porch. Same message as ours. She's shaken but safe. I'm bringing her to us. Emily's relief was fleeting. Drek's reach was spreading, a web tightening around them. When Jacob returned with Linda, gray-haired, eyes wide but defiant, the apartment felt smaller, the walls closing in. Linda hugged Emily fierce, her voice trembling. They think they can scare us? Not my girl. Jacob set his phone down, the new footage loaded. They're sloppy, he said. Left tire tracks, same car. We've got him. Mike scribbled notes. This is personal now. I got a contact in the DA's office. Owes me a favor. With your stuff and mine, we can push for an investigation. Emily's resolve hardened. Do it. They don't get to touch my family. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Emily sat with Jacob, Linda dozing on a couch nearby. The camera's red light blinked, a silent sentinel. They're not stopping, she whispered. What if? They will. Jacob cut in, his hand on hers. I've faced worse overseas. Men with guns, not just mouths. Drek's a coward hiding behind Pierce. We got the truth, Em. That's our weapon. She nodded, clinging to his certainty. But outside, a car engine growled, low and deliberate, circling the block. Jacob tensed, checking the footage, same plates. They're taunting us, he muttered. Mike's phone buzzed, a reply from his DA contact. Bring it tomorrow. We'll talk. Hope flickered, but Emily felt the web tightening. Drek and Pierce weren't just a gang. They were power, and power didn't fall easy. Jacob squeezed her hand, his eyes fierce. We're not running. We're ending this. The city hummed beyond the walls, restless and waiting. Emily leaned into him, her fear matched by a growing fire. Drek had no idea the storm he'd unleashed. The Cleveland morning dawned cold and sharp, a thin mist clinging to the east side streets. Emily sat on the couch, her hands resting on her belly, the baby's kicks a steady rhythm against the chaos outside. Jacob paced near the window, his phone buzzing with updates from Mike and Caitlin. The security camera footage, Drek's car circling the tire tracks at Linda's, played on a loop in his mind. Last night's threat lingered, but today they'd strike back. Linda brewed coffee in the kitchen, her presence a quiet strength, while the apartment buzzed with purpose. Mike burst in at 7 a.m., his coat damp with mist. DA's on board, he said, breathless. They're opening a case, harassment, racial targeting, maybe racketeering if we tie it to Pierce. We've got a hearing this afternoon. Jacob stopped pacing. That fast. Caitlin pulled every favor she's got. Mike said, grinning. Your footage, my docs, they're gold. But Drek's not going to sit quiet. Emily's stomach tightened. What about Pierce? Mike's grin faded. He's slippery, denies everything. We need Drek to crack. Caitlin arrived minutes later, her briefcase stuffed with files. We're filing a civil suit against Drek's crew, she said, spreading papers on the table. Intimidation, property damage, enough to drag them into court. Mike's expose drops at noon. If the DA's serious, they'll move on Pierce too. Jacob handed her the latest footage. They hit Linda's place. Same car. We got timestamps. Caitlin's eyes gleamed. Perfect. This isn't just a gang, it's a pattern. By midday, Mike's article hit online. East Side Terror, gang linked to Councilman, with photos, bank records, and Jacob's recordings. X erupted. Hashtag Justice for Cleveland trending as locals shared their own Drek stories. Outside the courthouse, a crowd gathered, dozens then hundreds, holding signs, in the fear, no more silence. Emily watched from the car, her breath catching. They're with us, she whispered. Jacob squeezed her hand. We started this, Em. Let's finish it. The courtroom was a pressure cooker, packed with tense faces. Drek slouched at the defense table, his hoodie swapped for a cheap suit, his smirk defiant. His lawyer, a slick man with a greased smile, waved off the suit. My client's a victim of rumors, he said. No proof, just a couple with a grudge. Caitlin stood, her voice cutting through. We got proof. Video of Drek's crew threatening Emily Jones, vandalizing her home. Audio of racial slurs. Witnesses. Linda Jones saw them at her house. This isn't a grudge. It's a crime spree. The judge, a wiry man with a stern frown, leaned forward as Caitlin played the store recording. Drek's voice, cold and clear, "Ain't no place for you here." Murmurs rippled. Then the footage, Drek's car, the bricks note, Linda's porch. The crowd outside chanted, audible through the walls. Drek's lawyer faltered. "That's circumstantial." "Save it," the judge snapped. "I've seen enough to proceed." Drek took the stand, his swagger crumbling. "I run my block," he said, shrugging. "They're outsiders stirring trouble. Ain't my fault they can't handle it." Jacob stood next, his voice steady. "We've lived here our whole lives. You targeted my wife, pregnant, for her skin. Threw a brick through our window, threatened her mom. That's not running a block. That's cowardice." Drek's eyes flashed, but he said nothing. The judge's gaze bore into him. "You've got a lot of eyes on you, son, and not much to say." Caitlin dropped the bomb. "Mike's bank records, linking Drek to Pierce. This isn't just a gang," she said. "It's a paid operation. Councilman Pierce profits while Drek terrorizes." The room exploded, gasps, shouts. Drek's lawyer objected, but the judge silenced him. "I'm referring this to the DA. We're done here." Outside, the crowd roared as Jacob and Emily emerged. Drek glared from the steps, his crew shrinking behind him. "This ain't over," he hissed, but his voice cracked. Jacob met his stare. "Yeah, it is." That night, the DA raided Drek's hangout, tipped off by Mike's source. Emily watched the news from the couch, Linda beside her, Jacob's arm around her shoulders. "They've got him," Mike texted. "Pierce too, warrants out." Emily exhaled, the weight lifting. "We did it," she said, tears welling. "Without a fight." Jacob kissed her forehead. "Told you, Em. Truth's stronger than they are." The city pulsed outside, restless but shifting. Drek's rain was cracking, and Pierce's shadow loomed less dark. The line had held, justice was coming, and they'd drawn it together. The Cleveland sky glowed soft pink as dawn broke over the east side, a quiet promise after weeks of storm. Emily stood in their apartment, her hands on her belly, now heavier with the baby due any day. The graffiti on their door was gone, painted over by neighbors who'd stopped by with brushes and smiles. The air smelled of fresh coffee, brewing in the kitchen where Linda hummed an old tune. Jacob sat on the couch, scrolling through news on his phone, his face calm for the first time in months. Drek's reign had ended, and the city was exhaling. The courtroom victory had been just the start. That night, the DA's raid netted Drek and 3 of his crew, caught with burner phones linking them to Pierce. By morning, Councilman Pierce was in cuffs, his office searched, his denials drowned out by Mike's exposé. The evidence, Jacob's footage, Caitlin's filings, Mike's records, had built a wall too high to climb. Emily watched it unfold on TV, her heart pounding as anchors called it a reckoning for Cleveland's East Side. Days later, the judge handed down rulings. Drek got 8 years, harassment, vandalism, racial intimidation. His smirk wiped clean as he was led away. His crew took plea deals, scattering like shadows. Pierce faced corruption charges, his career torched, with a trial looming. The crowd outside the courthouse cheered, a sound Emily still heard in her dreams. Raw, triumphant, free. Now, 3 weeks on, life shifted. Emily stepped onto the porch, the street alive with kids playing, their laughter a new beat for the neighborhood. Jacob joined her, his arm around her shoulders. "Feels different," he said, his voice low. "It is," she replied, leaning into him. "They're not afraid anymore." Linda emerged, a mug in hand. "Y'all did that," she said, pride in her eyes. "Gave inga voice." Emily smiled, her throat tight. "We just held the line." That afternoon, Caitlin called. "Case is closed. Drek's done. Pierce is singing to cut a deal, exposing more dirt. You're heroes around here." "Not heroes," Jacob said. "Just stubborn." Caitlin laughed. "Stubborn works. Take care of that baby." Mike stopped by later, his grin wide. "Story's gone national. Hashtag Justice for Cleveland's everywhere. You've got folks thanking you from Akron to Columbus." Emily blushed. "We didn't plan that." "Doesn't matter," Mike said. "You showed him how to fight smart." The next day, Emily felt the first real contraction. By evening, she was in the hospital, Jacob at her side, Linda pacing the waiting room. Hours blurred, pain, hope, his hand in hers. until a cry pierced the air. Their daughter, Grace, was born, tiny and perfect, her eyes wide with wonder. Emily held her, tears falling, the weight of their battle lifting with every breath Grace took. "She's here," Jacob whispered, his voice breaking. "We made it, Em." Back home a week later, the apartment felt fuller, alive with Grace's coos. Neighbors dropped off gifts, blankets, diapers, casseroles. Each visit a quiet thank you. One woman, her face lined with years, hugged Emily tight. "My boy's not scared to walk home now," she said. "Because of you." Emily's eyes welled. "We just wanted peace." "You gave us more," the woman replied, smiling. That night, Jacob set up Grace's crib. The security camera retired to a drawer. Emily watched from the couch, Grace asleep against her chest. "Think it'll stick?" she asked. "The change." Jacob sat beside her, his hand on Grace's tiny back. "It's a start. Drek's gone, Pierce too. People see they can stand up. Won't forget that." She nodded, peace settling deep. The east side wasn't perfect. Scars ran long, but it was breathing again. Kids played. Doors stayed unlocked. Voices carried without fear. Drek had targeted her for her skin, her baby, her life, but he'd lost, undone by a man who fought with truth, not fists. A month later, sentencing confirmed it. Drek got 10 years total, Pierce 12. The news ran a clip of Jacob's testimony. "That's not running a block. That's cowardice." Emily watched, Grace in her arms, pride swelling. "You're lethal in your own way," she teased. Jacob grinned, rare and bright. "Only when it counts." Outside, the city hummed, its pulse steadier now. Emily rocked Grace, the future wide open, a daughter born into a world they'd helped mend. Justice hadn't come with blood, but with courage, proof, and a community that finally roared. The shadows had lifted, and the light was theirs.